Hey there everyone, and welcome to some more RPG horror stories with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have quite a few tales about some ill-fated games of Dungeons & Dragons. A story about a DM using a D&D game as a dating sim, much to the chagrin of other players, and more. But first, you know him and you love him. It's Lucky, the like and comment kitty. That ought to be worth some likes, right? But with that said, let's get into these stories. DMs, When Did Your Game Fall Apart? By Reddit user Clayton922000. I'll go first. I was running a game for 4 friends and my brother. I didn't learn until much later, nearly 1 year later, when it all hit the fan. They were fighting this giant guardian, and they had to solve a puzzle to defeat it. It was a pretty obvious puzzle, by the way. My brother was the only one attempting to solve the puzzle, while the rest were just ignoring the idea and scattering themselves, leaving them SOL if they went down. One player said that he wouldn't be able to attend the game, so his character was taken over by another player, until he decided he wanted to play after all in the middle of battle. He asked what was going on, and I attempted to explain what was happening. He asked what everyone was doing, and the other 3 players said that they were attacking the Guardians, while my brother explained that he was working on the pedestal puzzles. This player then said, "Why are you wasting your time on the puzzle when we could just destroy the Guardian?" My brother was the only one who listened when I explained that with everything he solved, a piece of the Guardian grew weaker, losing an ability. All the other players said that I never explained it, even though my brother heard me say it. At this point, they started to argue, saying that it made no sense. The late player insulted my brother, though I can't remember what he said, but it was a good 10 to 15 minutes of arguing, until I had enough. I blurted out that if you can't work together, why are you an adventuring party? I then left the call and started to angry cry. Later on, one of the players told me that the 4 didn't meld well with my brother, which is perfectly fine, but they waited nearly a year to let me know. I deleted the Discord server and the Roll20 game, just to clear the air of this mess. What sucks is that they were nearly finished with the campaign, just a few more sessions until the final fight. Man, that sucks. To have to end a campaign so close to the end just because the players couldn't pay attention. You would think that the brother trying to solve the puzzle would have been a hint that the DM said something about it. Hell, the brother could have had his character shout to the other characters about it. I think that the other players were saying that OP's brother didn't meld well as a cope for him being the only one to listen and try to solve the puzzle. And instead of admitting that they could possibly be in the wrong, they just wanted to boot the brother instead. Well, congratulations. You booted the entire game instead. But with the main question asked in this post, a bunch of other people commented their stories about how their games fall apart. So let's take a look at a few of those. Story comment by Reddit user Sketch Elder. Had one game nearly fall apart when I couldn't make it to a session, and a player decided to run the game themselves using the same player characters, and insisted it be part of the regular campaign. He ended up having them fight a devil, and they were all marked with the symbol of ball, and I figured, what the heck, I'll run with it, and maybe use it later on as a big boss. Cut to a few months later, after they finished a big story arc, and it actually fell apart because I had a player come to me because he didn't enjoy his character and wanted to try a different class. So we agreed with a plan to use the mark to cause his character to die, so he could introduce his new character, and I figured I could use it as part of the next arc. The moment comes, and his arm, where the mark was, started heating up and smoking. He spontaneously combusted into flames and died. The player acted surprised and got upset, even though we both agreed on this exact death scenario outside of the game. Then all the players turned on me, saying that it was unfair. Even after explaining to them the discussion outside of the game, the mood was never the same. Enthusiasm dwindled for a few more sessions, until people stopped showing up. Dude, What the hell is that player's problem? It almost sounded like they purposely set up OP to appear to be the bad guy. Then the fact that the other players still took their side after OP explained what happened is BS as well. It sucks that things fell apart after this, and that the players eventually stopped showing up, but in the end, I would count this as a blessing, as those players showed their true colors, and now OP is free to find another group that isn't full of a-holes. Let's move on to the next one. Story comment by Reddit user Red Mantis Valerian. When they refuse to participate in scheduling. It's really simple. I hate scheduling. I think I speak for all GMs when I say that nobody enjoys the process, and it's a million times worse for the person that's pushing everyone to provide times and arbitrating the process. I couldn't just avoid this one though. Due to the jobs people worked, we couldn't always meet on a designated day at a designated time. We always needed to plan it out, week by week. Absolute torture. It gets worse, because oftentimes people would stay quiet as we're making plans, and when we'd finally settle on a time after several days of back and forth, someone would go, "Oh, sorry, I can't do that day." And the process starts all over again. Even worse were the times where people stayed entirely out of the discussion until the day before or the day of a time that everyone else agreed on, just to say that it didn't work for them. And then we didn't get to play that week because the other times people were available had already passed. Just effing killing me now. It got to the point where all of the stress and constant mental anguish around scheduling the perfect time began to affect my health. Constant headaches. I couldn't sleep. I was totally burnt out. And I had enough. So I came up with a plan and I spoke to my group and said, "Hey guys, listen. I want to play this game as much as you do, but having to do all the scheduling every time we play is just too much. So I propose we do it this way. Everyone post the times you're available each week. I'll find a time that works for everybody, and we'll just repeat that every week." Simple, right? I figured that if everyone was interested in continuing the game, it's a simple enough thing to just look at your schedule, pick a handful of times, and then I'd just pick out the opening. I mean, it's basically what we were doing every week anyway. You're just saving the GM the hassle of having to hunt you down every time the rest of the group had responded. No more back and forths, no more restarting, no more canceling just because someone wouldn't pay attention. Just post your schedule at the beginning of the week, and it simplifies everything. And one person replied their schedule. Great. Then the next. Perfect. Then absolute effing silence for the entire week, so we don't have a game that week. Next week, try again. 3 people responded, and the last one says absolutely nothing. All week. So we don't play that week either. At this point, I'm wondering if the group even wants to play, despite all of them telling me that they do, because of how effing hard it is just to lay out your schedule. So I tell them straight. Guys, I'll be upfront with you. I'm not doing scheduling anymore. Either everyone participates in posting their schedules, or someone else takes the job of wrangling everyone together, because I will not do it anymore. If neither of these happen, the game isn't happening. So if you want to play, then it's in your hands. Then 2 replies. All week. And total silence from the rest. So I just stopped trying, and we haven't had a session since. And this all happened about 6 months ago. From every single member of this group, I've gotten requests to start that game up again. Some of them are bringing it up almost every week. "It was so fun. I loved that character. Just say a time, I'll be there." And every time my answer is the same. I want to play the game too, but I'm not doing scheduling. You're more than welcome to try to get everyone together, and I'll run it, but I'm not doing the scheduling anymore. Not a single one of them have made the effort to schedule a time, or even just post their schedules for the week. So we still haven't played, and honestly, I'm content. No game is infinitely better than that scheduling BS each week. Jeez, It's no wonder that OP was getting headaches from this. Scheduling games can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, as most people have jobs and other commitments that take precedent over tabletop RPGs. But you would think that if the players liked the game so much and wanted to play, they could do the simple task of saying, "Hey, here's when I'm available." It's not fair to the DM to place all of that on them, especially considering how much work goes into campaign and session prep. Then to have a time that you think is good for everyone, and then have someone tell you at the last minute that they can't make it, is kinda disrespectful. So I don't blame OP for putting his foot down and saying that he wasn't doing it anymore. And apparently, the players weren't that invested, if them not playing for 6 months after this is any indication. Perhaps OP can just take the players that actually did post their schedules the first few times, and just run a game for those. Let's move on. Story comment by Reddit user Tropical King. I was in a D&D 4th edition campaign as a player. We met this dragon on top of her base, on top of a mountain. For some reason, 2 of the other player characters decided to anger the dragon and then run away and jump off a cliff. They didn't survive the jump, they just died. They were revived by the cleric, but at that point, the dungeon master just decided that we were playing D&D for the sake of playing D&D, and not really having much fun. Another campaign was a GURP space campaign, and as a player, I was playing the captain. Our spaceship crew were captured by another crew, and I, as the captain, ordered my crew to stand down and surrender. Nope, they didn't. They still wanted to play hero, and the opposing ship blasted our ship, and we all died. Well, that was short, sweet, and to the point, so my commentary will be as well. It sounds like the players don't really care about the game, as they just Leroy Jenkins games into ending. I'd say that if you want to play in a game that you could get invested in, perhaps find a different group, because this one ain't it. On to the next one. Story comment by Reddit user The Real Thordic. I had to kill an entire campaign over one sentence once. I had a Greyhawk campaign that was based in the city of Irongate. It was under siege, and the players were trying to keep it from falling. The first half dozen adventures or so went great. I had a lot of background notes, NPCs, and had done a bunch of setting work. We got around to the 7th session, and the players were on an undercover mission. They had a detailed cover story, as they were trying to move freely outside of the city, as they tried to find a way to break the siege. Forged documents were acquired, and everything was set. The party gets out of the city without a hitch, but shortly after, runs into a patrol, and the patrol leader asks where they are from. One player, who had the highest charisma by far and was supposed to be on top of these interactions, replies, "Oh, we just left Irongate." Chaos ensues, and the entire campaign ended up going off the rails from there, and we scrapped it a few sessions later. To this day, 10 plus years later, "I'm from Irongate" is how my friends and I refer to someone doing something stupid. Well, at least that final story comment ended on a bit of a higher note. No players being that guy, no scheduling conflicts. It was just one player having a lapse of judgment and doing something stupid. Though, at least it sounds like the group still plays together and have been for quite some time, just with an inside joke to refer to. But now, I think it's time for a kitty intermission. There we go. Now, let's move on to a few more stories. I am so sick of DnD Dating Sim by Reddit user Rogue Donut. To start this off, romance in a campaign isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if the dungeon master is left unchecked, well, that's another story. A few years ago, my partner and I joined a campaign that was made up of 2 other sets of married couples. Being fairly newlywed, we decided to make 2 characters that had the potential for a romantic connection, one madly in love with the other, and the other being completely oblivious to the one's true feelings. They were fun to play, and we had a blast. Just a goofy concept that, unfortunately, ruined the campaign. Somewhere along the road, the Dungeon Master decided that he was super invested in the goofy romance and had to force it along at his pace, taking the silliness away and making it a serious relationship for the characters involved. Then he decided to use it as an excuse to play matchmaker for all the player characters. Let me rephrase that, actually. He decided to use the campaign as some sort of twisted couples counseling with his girlfriend, and tried to see how many NPCs he could get to bang her character. This has caused most of the group to leave and not come back. It's gotten to the point now where every male NPC that's introduced serves no other purpose than to try and seduce that player character in some demented interpretation of love and romance. And the problem is only worsened because the Dungeon Master and his girlfriend pre-plan and role-play out how they want certain scenes to go long before the actual sessions happen. And I'm just so tired of it. The previous session had not one, not two, but 3 dates for the girlfriend's player character. Back to back, I might add. That took up well over an hour of continuous playtime. I'm sick of playing DnD Dating Simulator. I mean, I signed up to go on an adventure, not whatever the heck this is. I have to agree that sounds a bit annoying. A simple little goofy dynamic between OP and their significant other's characters, morphing into romantic roleplay between the DM and his girlfriend, wouldn't be that bad if it was just 1 or 2 NPCs every now and then. But for the Dungeon Master to take full-ass sessions to do it, while the other players just watch, is taking it too far. It's no wonder that the game had lost players because of this, and my advice is to talk to the DM about it, and tell him how it's bothering you and taking up way too much time, and that if it doesn't change, then he will lose 2 more players. And checking back on it, it looks like they did, as OP did post an update that stated that it was hard to do, but they did end up leaving. And apparently, it made the DM and his girlfriend really angry. But what did you expect? For them to attend the DM and girlfriend show every week? Let's move on. What is it with bad GMs and body horror? By Reddit user, Loam Improvement. I've noticed that the worst games I've been in are usually with those GMs who insist on terrible crap happening to players. Mauling, scarring, amputation, corruption, disease, the like. And it's now like every time it happens, it's a big red flag. And it's uncanny how readily the worst GMs throw downright horrific crap at players. I recently fell out of a 5e campaign with a GM who ended up TPKing with an encounter with a challenge rating that was about 8 higher than the average party level, not even taking into account all the negatives that were stacked on us beforehand. Over the course of about 7 sessions, the 4 of us, a fighter, a druid, a wizard, a rogue, and myself, collectively had 3 limbs torn. These all happened in a randomly rolled fight against werewolves, where the party had no magic weapons and could not escape. One player character, the monk, died, and the player rolled up the druid. The other 3 were stabilized, albeit down a few arms and legs. 2 eyes gouged, one of which gave my ranged rogue disadvantage on all ranged attacks because you can't gauge depth perception as well anymore. 2 debilitating diseases, permanent ability reduction, with no way to get it fixed, which actually dropped the fighter's strength into the negatives. 3 curses, which we were able to get fixed, after pointing out to the GM that they were crippling our characters. Fixed at the cost of 2 of the 4, count them, 4 magic items that we had at the time as a level 6 party. Because God forbid the GM give us anything without getting his own jollies off. Some of these items were, one that gave the druid disadvantage on con saves, one that gave the wizard a 50% chance to gain no benefit from a long rest, and take a level of exhaustion instead, and one that made the fighter grow a 3rd leg, which reduced his speed by 15 feet, and the GM told him that he could choose between giving up his +1 weapon to get it cured, or using it to cut the leg off and make several con saves to not die of shock. He lived, thankfully, but the GM made the fighter roleplay it in excruciating detail. That's the worst of it anyway. Should have been a huge red flag, but anytime the GM gave himself an opportunity to invite misery on a player character, he always had a look of what I can only describe as vile jubilation, as he rolled on a table and said something to the effect of, "Alright, let's see what's going to happen to you." Just the most antagonistic crap. I can't speak for the other players, but other than the fighter player, who was his longtime friend and fellow 40k enthusiast, it didn't seem like anyone but the GM was enjoying the debilitation conga that he laid out for us. Now, games like this with permanent injuries and such can be fun if that's the type of game you're looking for, but OP later clarified that this was advertised as your standard sword and sorcery Dungeons & Dragons game. Things like the fighter's strength going into the negatives, and a ranged character getting disadvantaged on their primary way of dealing damage would just hamper the fun of the game, for me at least, and it sounds to be the same way for OP. At this point, I would say to OP that this game just isn't for you, and that it may just be best to get your D&D fix with a different group that has a dungeon master that doesn't seem to get joy from mauling and permanently maiming your characters. But that is all the time we have for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.